All right, welcome everyone. Thank you for coming in and joining us on our event today. So we're just going to wait a 1 or 2 minutes just to get some last minute people coming in, and then we'll go ahead and get started. All right, everyone, you all want to go ahead and just get started?
Yep.
We'll go ahead and start rolling through. All right, well, firstly, thank you everyone again for joining today, and our organization is excited to have you all here for our APICS Professional Certification Seminar. And we want to also give a big thank you to our highly respected supply chain leaders we have on the line with us today, which we'll introduce shortly. They've chosen to invest their time into us as we continue our journey towards supply chain excellence. And again, we really appreciate you doing that for us. First, I want to go over a couple rules of the road, just making sure that, we provide the best experience possible for everyone. Before we go over the agenda, I want to discuss just a few rules. And everyone should have been auto muted when joining in order to, maintain, everyone's a good experience. We want to ask that you remain muted during the event, and you could submit any questions via the chat in the toolbar, and we'll go ahead and address them, towards the end of at the end of the presentation. We'll also be pushing some poll questions throughout the event, and your feedback is valuable and much appreciated. Video is optional. You don't have to have your video on. We'll leave that at your discretion. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and go through the agenda here. So first things first, we're going to go ahead and roll through the APICS UTD student chapter introduction, talk a little bit about our mission and vision and what it is that we do as an organization here. And then we'll move forward into introductions for our panelists that we have with us today. Next, we'll be going through our APICS professional certification presentation, which will be facilitated by Vince Mozik. Throughout this presentation, it's going to, present a great opportunity for you to be able to, understand the different professional certification options and different industry applications, as well as the upcoming course schedules and the registration process for getting involved, and some of the fees and discounts that we receive, as well as the ROI of obtaining a professional certification. After we conclude with the presentation, we'll roll into a Q&A session where we'll capture a lot of the chat questions and some questions that were submitted through our RSVP. And then after that, we'll proceed to the panel discussion where our panelists will take the opportunity to tell you why they chose supply chain management and what their experience was going through the certification process and how it's impacted their career. And we'll finish it off with any advice or insights that they have for us. So we'll go ahead and get started. So here at APICS UTD Student Chapter, we are dedicated to enhancing our members' experience outside of the classroom on their journey to supply chain excellence by providing valuable insights through networking opportunities, certification training webinars, and workshops with industry professionals, professional development meetings, and access to mentorship from industry leaders and events focused on current supply chain trends and resources. Our vision is to be the preeminent leader in providing real-world exposure to supply chain management knowledge and training at the University of Texas at Dallas. So a couple of our team members here, I'd like to also start by giving a big shout out to our APICS leaders who have put in so much work, to make this event possible. If you ever have any questions about APICS or want to find out more, you can reach out to any of us and we'd be glad to discuss. Here you can see our internal affairs, Ame, Nadia and Pranitha in our operations department, Tajal in our promotions, and Vikram and Jaja, who are our industry relations leads, and myself, the president of the organization. Some of the benefits that you have being a part of APICS student chapter is going to be access to professional development meetings, building your network with industry professionals, especially within our APICS network, learning industry best practices and latest trends in supply chain management, also given the opportunity to improve professional and technical skills while developing and polishing your leadership skills. It will also help to complement and enhance your classroom education. And being a member of APICS comes with certain discounts on APICS certifications. We also have a couple of really interesting things that we've been working with our parent chapter on, getting access to an exclusive APICS mentorship program, having the opportunity to get paired up with an industry leader, as well as scholarship opportunities for professional certifications. Next, I'll go ahead and pass it on to Vikram, and our industry relations lead, and he will be presenting our panelists.
Hi, I'd like to introduce Professor Vince Mozik, who's a VP of Education of the APICS North Texas chapter, and as well as the APICS Certified Lead Instructor. He's also an adjunct professor at the University of Texas at Dallas. He has had like 17 years of experience in Fortune 500 companies across different industries, and he has actually had a significant part in developing the APICS North Texas chapter here in the Dallas-Fort Worth region. He has got recognitions in 2019 as a Rising Star Award, and as well as the Education Excellence Award in 2020. He has now actually served in several leadership roles for the past 7 years in Boeing Global Services, and as well as Avail Services in Dallas, Texas. He has Parker Hannifin, American Axle, Jabil Circuit, General Electric, Mitsubishi Motors, and Marathon Oil. He has had his education in integrated supply matrix management, and as well as an MBA from University of Detroit, Mercy. He has got like several certifications in CPIM, CSCP, PMPs, and SCOR-P, which is quite a vast number of certifications. He has almost this covers the major certifications that's been provided. He has been a great instructor, and he can answer any kind of subject nuances and other kind of technicalities that's there with respect to certifications, whether in CSCP, on CPIM, or like other certifications. I have personal experience sitting in one of his classes in CSCP, which has been about 8 weeks by North Texas chapter and in collaboration with UT Dallas. So if you ever have a chance to attend CSCP or any of the classes that's there, you'll have a good chance to sit in one of Professor Vince Mozik's class. So he'll be our primary speaker once I'm done with the introduction, and I'll go and introduce our next speaker, who is Professor Ramesh Subramoniam. He has got 3 certifications in CFPIM and Six Sigma Black Belt and PMP. This is not exclusively with APICS certificate, just APICS certification. It is Six Sigma Black Belt is associated with ASQ, and PMP is again a different organization. He has got like 2-3 certification to his name, so he has a good mix of understanding about like what APICS has to offer and like what other management certifications can provide you. And he has about got a vast experience in general business consulting field for about 27 plus years, and he's our professor in University of Texas at Dallas. He is our mentor, who's also a professor for UT Dallas student chapter with APICS. So he has been an excellent guide and mentor for the student organization from its inception, and he has been supportive for Richard, unlike the previous president as well. So you can ask any kind of questions with respect to consulting on how like it helps a business with respect to how the subject matter connects to the industry. Those kinds of questions, if you throw at them, you'll be able to answer any kind of question of that sort. So next, I'll be introducing our third speaker, who's our newest addition to the panel that's been hosted by like UT Dallas. Mr. Jay Iyengar is a expert in Oracle software and like implementation. It is mostly supply chain software and tool implementation. He has got a wide experience in telecom, healthcare, and IT support services as well. He is associated with GE Healthcare, Oracle, Motorola Computer Science Corp, and he's now working as a delivery architect in Capgemini Consulting. And he has got like a vast experience in Oracle ERP with respect to order processing, warehousing, and logistics. As opposed to how our last speaker, Professor Ramesh, experienced with SAP ERP. If you have, this is quite a counter to what like Mr. Jay Iyengar has to as his technical expertise in Oracle would be. He has got his education background from Northern Illinois University with an MBA, and he has got quite some certifications to his name, such as CPIM, PMP, and OCP. OCP is Oracle Certified Professional. This is a more technological certification, and PMP is a general management certification, and CPIM is supply chain certification. So he has also got a wide mix of certification that connects to the various management industries and business domains. So he'll be able to answer like your technological and IT related questions with a general supply chain and business management background. So that will be about our speakers. I'll just like hand over to Professor Mozik to present now. Thank you.
All right, thank you, UTD chapter, student chapter, for sharing the overview and the insight. I look forward to giving everyone an opportunity to get insight regarding the certifications. Thanks everyone on the phone for taking time on your Friday afternoon to learn more about APICS. I think it's really commendable, right? So we did the poll question went out. It looks like half the attendees were students and half of them were non-students. So we always have to think about, in supply chain, it's growing a lot, but we all want to make sure that we're continuing to learn and advance. And I'm a testament along with the other speakers as well regarding the value of APICS. So I'm going to spend the next couple of minutes giving an overview about the certifications to find out, what they are and which ones are right for you. And then we'll be consolidating questions that will be answered potentially during the Q&A session or later after the presentation. So on the first slide here that we all see is APICS has been a name, since the 1960s. It's been really well recognized in the industry. When people think about APICS, they think about workforce development. The last couple of years, ASCM is the parent company of APICS. So what that really means is there's three pillars. The APICS name is never really going to go away. It's just a matter of serving the focus of workforce development. And when we think about the other pillars of ASCM, there's corporate transformation. So what's exciting in supply chain is we think about end-to-end. There's a lot more focus on partnering with companies like Deloitte and doing things to help bring business value to companies that need help in supply chain. And then making an impact is the third pillar. So ASCM is putting a lot of time and resources and investment regarding sustainability. There's partnerships with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and things along those lines. So when you think about ASCM, just know that APICS is the workforce development focus in that regard. And I represent the North Texas chapter here, where we have almost nearly 800 members, and we help facilitate training and education and community involvement. And, you know, as we start, before we jump into the certifications, I kind of want to leave everyone with a premise. We have to realize, and some of us know this, or we'll learn this really quickly, but we all have to take control of our education and our continued learning as we start in the industry, right? So what's interesting is Harvard Business Review put an article out a couple of years back, and really what the premise of the article was that managers aren't doing enough to train employees for their future, right? So a lot of the large companies, they do have development programs, but in order for someone to continue to thrive, and with supply chain, it's so dynamic and it's changing quite a bit, we all have to put ourselves in the driver's seat on where we want to take our career. You know, in supply chain, there's all these different types of areas of experience and focus that we could have. And what everyone on the call should be thinking about is how can I figure out where I want to take my career, and how can I identify learning and education that might help me get there, right? And I'm going to spend the next couple of minutes talking about these certifications. So in orange is the CPIM. That certification is the first of APICS. It started in early 1970s. And then CSCP is the middle one in red there. That started in 2006. And then CLTD is a really new certification that focuses a lot on third-party logistics, transportation, and distribution. And in the middle of the slide there, we'll see, you know, principles. And what this really is it's learning that doesn't require a test or an exam to become certified. What the principles areas are, it's all about kind of bite-sized areas of supply chain that can help individuals learn. So usually when these sessions are held, they're only a day long, they're only a day session, and that individual or the students will leave with learning more about, you know, inventory management or manufacturing management, or, you know, logistics, and just really, it's really introductory. So the middle principles is really focused on individuals that are just starting to get into supply chain. If some of these other certifications that might seem a little too much of a time investment. And then the last one is SCOR, is Supply Chain Operation Reference Model. I'll talk through that. But, you know, before we go to the next slide, I just want to, I was a student member of my APICS, you know, at my university. And, you know, early in my career, I realized the value of APICS, and it's really helped me tremendously. So I'm extremely passionate regarding the certifications. And those that work at very large companies today, I think what we realize is there's a lot of process improvement activities, and there's a lot of challenges that companies have. And the great thing is these companies are really depending on supply chain professionals as yourself to help solve some of these problems, right? So the way to think about it is supply chain is growing significantly. It's generally one of the highest paid salary you know, majors out of the business school across most universities. And it's for good reason, because there's a lot of complex problems to be solved. And think about APICS as best standards, industry best practices are areas that can help individuals solve those problems. And here's a real simple way to think about the certifications. And this is one of my favorite slides. And if we think about, you know, supply chain can get pretty complex pretty quickly, right? But all supply chain really is plan, source, make, deliver, return, and enable. And as you can see from, you know, below, how the certifications kind of fit into that area, right? So CPIM is around plan, source, and make, more internal supply chain. And CSCP is end-to-end supply chain. And CLTD is more focused on the deliver, return, and enable. So a fun thing I like to do when I teach is I always like to get at the beginning of the courses, I like to understand where the students' passions are. And it's about, you know, if you're in supply chain, what area are you most interested in? And all these areas can drive significant value at companies, right? When you think about enable, the one thing to keep in mind with enable, it's all about technology. So things that are needed to help supply chains work properly. Enabling can be around, you know, network design, you know, even the HR function of helping find the right talent in supply chain. So that's what, you know, enable really sits on. So this is a good backdrop before we dive into CPIM, CSCP, and CLTD. in the score, this is a good backdrop of how it really fits in. And generally, most of the feedback that I get is planning and sourcing are the most areas that are interested, and those are kind of the foundational areas of supply chain. When we think about supply chain, right, it's all about, you know, raw material getting processed to the end product to the consumer, you know, from a material perspective, and all the steps that are needed to make that possible. And with that, a lot of things and challenges could happen. These are some general job descriptions or job titles that fall into plan, source, make, deliver, return. So, you know, pretty common things. Some of this might not be new information for everyone, but it's, you know, trying to tailor towards, you know, let's think about, you know, planning, source, make, deliver, return, and what are the areas of jobs that are out there, right? I've been very fortunate. I was able to sit in a lot of these different areas in my experience, similar to a lot of the two other panel panels on people on the discussion board today. So it'll be good to get good insight from us on what areas we think are, you know, most innovative and which ones companies need really a lot more help with, right? So when we think about the certifications, this is a one-page flyer that kind of shares about, you know, what are the eligibility requirements, what are the content areas in the exam detail. So starting with the CPIM, it's 2 exams. You have to pass 2 exams to earn the certification. The first one is part 1, which is basics of supply chain. And then part 2 is those other areas regarding, you know, management of resource, master planning, detailed scheduling, and execution and control. So part 2 is really challenging. Part 1 is introductory. And this exam used to be 5 modules. So when I took in a lot of the other individuals years ago, it was 5 different exams that were broken out from those areas. And, you know, with APICS exams, they're done at Pearson VUE. There was a question about where does one go to take the exams for APICS. So Pearson VUE is a company that has testing centers. There's quite a bit around the Dallas area. And that's where PMI and a lot of other companies leverage to have individuals pass. So they're computer-based exams. You know, they're all multiple choice. So for those that are, you know, concerned about essays, there's no essay questions on the exam. I always, you know, I'm a relatively slow test taker, and you'll have more than enough time to complete the exam. As you can see at the bottom there, each exam is 150 questions, and you'll have 3.5 hours to complete the exam. And then, you know, breaking down into what are the content areas in the middle, right? So kind of went through what CPIM is, and we'll talk a little bit more about this. And then also CSCP is about design, planning, and execution, and improvement and best practices. So when we think about improvement and best practices, I'm sure those on the phone have been, you know, experienced some things around Six Sigma and Lean, and just know that APICS, you know, is not the creator of those type of you know, standards, but APICS realizes that in supply chain, those areas are really good leverage points is to help solve problems. And then going back to, you know, as supply chains are becoming a lot more, you know, complex, we got to think about, you know, a lot of times people think supply chain, there's sequential activities that happen, but really, you know, supply chains are really dynamic, adaptive systems, right? So as demand changes, you know, the supply chain has to change accordingly, right? So with CLTD, with respect to what's going on in the distribution space and transportation, there's a significant amount of growth in that area. And CLTD is more focused on the deliver side, right? So we think about, you know, third-party logistics and all the activity that happens within that aspect. So each of these, there's a little bit of carryover, right? But there's a lot more deep focus on each area. So from a challenging perspective, they all have their own challenges to pass the exam. And I'm sure we'll talk through some of those as we go through. So starting with the CPIM, as I kind of mentioned earlier, there's a part 1, which is called the basics. And, you know, a lot of focus on capacity planning, a lot of focus on MRP, so material requirement planning. And that's one of the things that, how APICS was started was there was a bunch of engineers in Ohio that realized that they had some scheduling challenges at their factory. And they said, how do we come up with understanding logic? So for those that are familiar with MRP, APICS has that focus in CPIM. And it's about understanding what the logic really is. So we think about, you know, forecasting and available to promise and planned releases and all these activities that happened. And that's what the CPIM makes sure that individual can really understand. Because when ERP systems are becoming, companies are implementing, they really need to lean on individuals that understand how the process works and how things fit together. And those that have a CPIM are really good on being the domain expert in supply chain to help make these ERP systems work, properly. And then this is the most popular certification that we have. I'm actually teaching a class tomorrow. So this is the CSCP, and this is, again, end-to-end, right? So external and internal supply chain. And, this one sounds a little nicer than, certified production inventory manager. This is certified supply chain. It's pretty broad, right? And it's really breaking down into 3 pillars. So supply chain design, supply chain planning and execution, and then best practices. Both CPIM and CSCP, when we deliver the training, we deliver 48 hours of training. And when individuals, purchase our course, what they get is we now with respect to the pandemic, we'll mail the books to the individual's home, the student's home. They get an online learning kit, and which gives them a lot of practice on multiple choice questions and exercises. And then during our classes are relatively small, usually less than 20 students. And we really thrive on having interactive experiences through the sessions to make sure that, the understanding of the concepts are really being instilled in the students to pass the exam. So really, APICS with the exams, it's not just memorization, but it's really about understanding how everything, everything's really fits together and what the logic. Because what I always find about the APICS exams is the questions are very short and to the point. And there's a lot of reading and content that needs to be embraced by the student in order to do well in the exam. So luckily within the last couple of years at our North Texas chapter, we yield a over 80% first-time pass rate. And students have the option of doing self-study, or if they do, through our training, through our instructors. And it's generally a lot higher on the first-time pass rate for those that do the instructor experience. Reason being is, they stay on task. They have, we have weekly sessions, and they're really able to embrace the material a lot more with respect to all the exercises. And as we see here, the last, or not the last, but the newest certification to the suite of APICS is the CLTD. So certified logistics, transportation, and distribution. And we think about this, it's about, logistics network design, sustainability and reverse logistics. A lot of companies struggle on the reverse logistics piece, capacity planning and demand management, order management, inventory management, warehousing and transportation, and global logistics. And this is definitely a growth area. This, being the certification is relatively new, it's not as commonly seen in the job desired requirements for what companies are looking for, but it's only a matter of time where it continues to grow. So some of the themes between the certifications is a lot of focus on, capacity planning, inventory focus, and integration between the functions. We're in interesting times today. We think about, I was just reading about all these companies that went bankrupt, right? So Neiman Marcus, JCPenney, Lord & Taylor, Brooks Brothers, Men's Warehouse, a lot of retail went bankrupt, right? What we have to think about is understanding that industries are very, some industries are more competitive than others, but a lot of the time supply chain focus and doing the right things from that perspective could make a company be a lot more healthy to avoid, or delay the chance of bankruptcy, right? So what these certifications do is they really help individuals such as yourself really prove out what the best practices are. And like I mentioned before, a lot of large companies, they really lean heavily on these certifications, and they really require them for supply chain professionals. The other certification, so I finished this over Christmas break last year, so it's pretty fresh on my mind in regards to taking the exam. So what the SCOR is supply chain operation reference model, and this is a 3-day workshop, and it's one exam that's only 50 questions. Our chapter doesn't, we don't teach this at the local chapter. And the demographic for the students that usually take the SCOR is more of like executive level or leaders in supply chain that are really focused on identifying how can I how can I diagnose my supply chain and make sure that the business model that our companies has deployed, we make sure that we have an operational model that can fit that perspective, right? So that might seem pretty self-explanatory, but the truth of the matter is a lot of companies have to think about, I want to be aware of not only my customers, what their pain points are, but I want to be really focused on what my customers' pain points are. So SCOR is getting embraced heavily across the industry. You know, what's interesting is I've sat in a lot of consulting activities with, you know, the big consulting firms and, you know, involved in projects about fixing supply chains at companies. And what happens is they really lean heavily on the SCOR framework, right? And there's different levels of SCOR. So if you look at the bottom on, you know, processes, categories, and different elements. But when you think about SCOR, think about, let's understand what the true metrics are. So we think about in supply chains, there's no way around it. If you work in supply chain, you're going to focus on either reliability, responsiveness. You know, the word that we hear all the time now is agile, right? So flexibility, agile, and then cost and asset management. So everyone in supply chain is doing something in that regard. They're helping those areas work better at companies, right? So knowing where the customer's biggest focuses are, you know, is the customer more cost focused, or are they more, you know, focused on speed and flexibility, right? So companies today have to kind of get it right from different perspectives, but what SCOR really does is they drill down those aspects. And the beauty of SCOR is it sits above Six Sigma. If you look at level 4 at the bottom, you know, when companies are doing a lot of Six Sigma projects, we got to think about, are those projects that are being, you know, having, you know, sponsorship, do they really fit into what the biggest pain points are for the customers? Because the way to think about is, you know, there's a term called order winners and order qualifiers. So order winners are things that a company has a value proposition, they can do great things, hence it results in business, right? New business. But this really gets into that level. You know, you'll also see there's a SCOR app right there. So I would recommend that everyone download this app in the top right. It's APICS SCOR. And you can click on processes, performance practices, and people, and you'll get a good understanding of what SCOR is all about. And, you know, don't be afraid to, you know, before, you know, you don't have to have the certification to start using these type of practices in place. There's also a very helpful APICS dictionary phone app. I know everyone's on their phones, you know, all the time now. So those are good things to reference and, you know, sharpen your skills. So different processes, categories, and elements here. And yeah, SCOR is definitely a good area of focus. And we think about, I know what it's like to be in your shoes, right? So I fell into supply chain early I majored in it, and luckily I've stayed with that, you know, with that function, and I've learned to love it over time, right? And from a salary perspective, we always want to focus on what's the ROI. And you know, if you're early in your career, the one thing I would recommend is don't always focus on salary right away. Focus on trying to solve the most complex problems at your company, because the salary will be a byproduct of the amount of challenging things you can do in supply chain, right? So in supply chain, there's a lot of transactional activity and there's a lot of strategic projects. But make no mistake about it, there's surveys that are done every year, and APICS certified definitely yields a higher salary potential for those that are not certified, right? And this is actually the 2020 salary review, so it's relatively, it's very new. And then we think about the different certifications. So how do they rank in salary? So a survey was done across the country, all different industries, and this is kind of how they shook out for the percentages of salary. And the way I would think about this is don't let this steer you on what certification you want to go with based on where the highest salary is. Thinking about areas of supply chain, which areas seem most interesting to you, and how do you become a subject matter expert in that? Because we're in a great time with supply chain. It's growing quite a bit. The silver lining that's going on right now with the pandemic is a lot of people are realizing the importance of supply chain more than ever. But just know that more individuals are getting involved in supply chain. But how do you continue to help set yourself apart? And APICS certifications are one of the ways to do that. And this is another breakdown of the salaries that are out there. Again, if there's any questions, you can put them in the chat boxes, and we'll address those. And then back in 2006, and we'll probably touch on, we'll get perspective from the other panelists in regards to how certifications has helped them. But, my friend he's a founder of a company called Industry Star, which is a consulting firm out of Ann Arbor, Michigan. I was fortunate to get an interview with them in 2016, and they asked me about certifications. And this was my insight at the time. So, now we're, in 2020, and I still believe in the same areas, right? So in supply chain, from certifications, they shorten the learning curve. So as you move around companies, you'll be able to really diagnose and fix problems if you have APICS certifications. Outside of technical skills, how certifications helped you. I think sometimes there's an intimidation factor that happens at these big companies. If you just start out of college, maybe you're a little less, you're not as outspoken as you want to be, right? But thinking about having the certification background will really allow you to, maybe challenging is too strong of a word, but not be afraid to identify where gaps happen, right, within companies. And you can always lean on, what you learned in the APICS material. So, it can help you build a lot of confidence very early in your career. And then, do you recommend companies put certification places in programs? So, a lot of companies have, when we do training, we did some training at some companies the last couple of years, which have been great. And supply chains are getting a lot more complex. And I always use the example about, we think about toothpaste, not too long ago, there was only a couple different options of toothpaste. Now, when we go down the aisle to buy toothpaste, it could be relatively intimidating, right? So as supply, some companies have more stock keeping units, things get more complex because they have to, manage the demand, the variability, the velocity. And that's why it's very important for these certifications to get embraced if you want to continue your career in supply chain. And then from an instructor perspective, so out of North Texas, this is just an overview of our instructors. And, a lot of these big companies are listed in regards to the experience that our instructors have worked at. So when we do our training in North Texas, chances are you'll have one of these instructors be the trainer. And we really try to focus on leaning on what we learned in the industry and how they really tie into the principles and the practices. Because it's a lot more than memorization. And the great things that happen in our classes is there's a lot of good dialogue amongst the students to make sure that, people are sharing how other companies do things, and we can.
Richard, can we ping Vince?
Sorry about that, everyone. We might seem to be having a connection issue. Can you hear me, Richard? Okay.
Vince, you're on mute right now.
Yep.
Yeah, he dropped on the call. So let me go ahead and push a poll question here for everybody. I'm going to push the first poll question that we had for some of the lay people coming in.
Hey, Richard, I don't know. All right, Richard, can everyone hear me okay? All right, thanks everyone, sorry about that. So thanks for doing the poll question there. And we're wrapping up the overview of the certifications. I know we went through a lot of material in a short time. I want to give a lot of time for the panelists as well. They have a lot of great insight that can be really engaging as we continue on. But these are, some of our, classes that we had. We taught a class at Medtronic. And, very exciting. We teach most of our classes out of UTD on Saturdays. I'll show you the schedule in a little bit. And one thing is when you pass the exam, the one thing I enjoy is we give you a free dinner pass to our event. And we really recognize you at the event. And you're really great opportunity to to network with our chapter and learn from others that have worked in supply chain for a number of years, because you'll be amazed at how many professionals in supply chain really want to give back to the career. And because we were able to get insight from leaders above us as we grew as well. So some administration things. So this could be a lot of font and a lot of content on this slide. So let me just run through some of these questions might be, on the top of your mind. So we offer discounts for veterans or unemployed. UTD gets an extensive discount. If you're a UTD student, when you take our courses, it's only a couple $100 and you're not going to find a better deal than that. All the registration is done through Cynthia Hunt, and there's a link. So if you were to type in UTD APICS, you would see the schedule and you would see how to register for the course. To purchase books, we have, that should actually say our information. We have an information email that will get updated there. And then, we have over 80% of first-time pass rates. We give free passes to future classes, for repeat students. So in the event that you don't pass, we're with you on the journey. We want to make sure that you do pass. So you can attend our events for free. And, some of the testimonials, right? So we all comparing about self-study versus training, as we always get really positive feedback from our students. It keeps them on track when they do our weekly sessions, and they learn a lot quicker and better. And it's really a better experience for them. So it makes the training a lot easier for them to learn the body of knowledge. And here's our upcoming schedule here. So let me just touch on this really quickly. We're starting CPIM 1 in August, so end of the month. That's the basics of supply chain. I have the schedule on the right there. And then September, we're going to hold a principles course on demand management. That's just a 1 day. And then October, we have CLTD coming. So there's a lot of opportunity to really learn about our certifications. In November, there's another principles class we're having. So as you can see, the green dots are representing the month of the start date for the certifications. And one thing I didn't spend a lot of time touching on, but there's also Demand Driven Institute, which is a partnership with ASCM. And that's all about thinking about demand planning a little differently. And that is demand driven based on the horizon, because we all know that forecasting is not always accurate. So there's a movement in the industry about demand driven. And we're planning to hold a session potentially in December in that regard. And yeah, that's kind of a layout of our schedule. And then also what I'm most excited about in June is we plan to hold an SNOP, so sales and operations planning session then. So that's the schedule. And with that, that's the end of my portion. So Richard, if you want to take over take back over control. Thanks everyone for your time.
Richard, we cannot hear you.
Sorry about that. I didn't hit the unmute. Yeah, so I went ahead and sent out a poll question to kind of get a feel of what certifications everyone's interested in. But, first I want to, say thank you very much, Professor Vince Mozik, for that valuable presentation. And, I, for one, feel much more informed and confident as I get ready to pursue my first certification. I can definitely say that for sure. And I also wanted to just say, just from personal experience, after getting involved with a lot of the APICS members and a lot of supply chain industry professionals, especially through the APICS network, when Professor said that, everybody in this industry, it seems like they want to, really pay it forward and help everybody out. I mean, I just want to say that I've had nothing but that exact experience through my journey with APICS. So, just wanted to, put some more affirmation on that. So first, what we got here, I'll go ahead and start with the first question we got. Can I enroll in a certification if I don't have supply chain work experience? I'll let whichever one of you panelists want to jump in and add on that.
Sure. Well, maybe I'll start. Thanks for the question. There's different requirements for each certification. You don't need to have supply chain experience generally, and you do have to submit an application to sit for the exam. So there's in the beginning of the presentation, we laid out what the requirements were for each. And, one could do really well in these exams without having supply chain experience. So what I would recommend is look at whatever certification you're interested in, apply to see if you can sit for the exam, and don't be intimidated if you don't have supply chain experience, because sometimes you can learn the right things at the first time, right? And then anyone else want to add?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I kind of agree with what Vince said, but I want to also mention the key thing what he was talking about was to understand what you really want, right? So always look at what you're interested in, and I can tell you, coming from industry and consulting, certification as a pillar alone is not going to get you a job. Okay, so certification is a body of knowledge, whether it's PMP or APICS or Six Sigma. It gives you a body of knowledge, and the comfort zone recruiters have is that you've gone through that body of knowledge rather than a piece of the pie you're bringing to the table. So, if you have the experience to back it up, then it really bonds together and it becomes very powerful. If you don't have the experience, then, don't take certification just for the sake of certification. It should be done for backing up your experience. It can be even internship. It can be a project you did in the class. You don't have to go and, but always have a story to tell in front of the recruiter, how you're going to present it, right? Don't look at it as a paper document. That is the one thing I would like to do.
Absolutely. Thank you, Professor Ramesh. And then we have another question in here in regards to the continued learning credits. If one of y'all want to take that one.
Yeah, I responded in the chat box. Every 5 years, we have to submit, if you're certified, 75 hours of continued learning. And another question came that Brittany asked in this regard too. Well, that's done through the ASCM website. And it's all about how do you get this learning? It could be anything related to supply chain. So thinking about all these, take advantage of sitting in webinars, training, all this free content at our fingertips can be considered learning. But it's a good thing because it forces us to continue to learn every 5 years. And we should be, 75 hours is not a lot every 5 years.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. I went ahead and put out another poll question just to kind of get some more feelers. Also, we'll move on to the next question. In any of y'all's opinion, how much time should we prepare to study for the CSCP? And do you have suggested study resources or techniques? Of course, going through the course is going to be maximum value.
I can start with this answer as well. So this CSCP and CPIM, and they're all, what I'm learning is CLTD is considered one of the easier exams. These are going to take a lot more than, thinking about the time it takes for 3 credits is really focused, education and studying. So it's going to be over 40 hours of individual. A lot of time, and then when you go to the class, if you read the material beforehand, you're going to be further along. So a lot of times we tell the students that you have to do a lot of due diligence on your own part, and really precise note taking and understanding the principles, because APICS, the exams will figure out really quickly if you know the material or not. So definitely over 40 hours of individual self-study along with attendance, but we all have different, learning speeds. So.
Awesome. Thank you, Professor Vince. Next question is going to be, how do I leverage certifications in job interviews as a newcomer in the field of supply chain? So I'm assuming this is on the premise of getting a certification while a student and being able to leverage that as well.
Yeah, I think, I kind of answered that question a little bit in terms of how to bond it together. In terms of a recruiter, right? I'm putting my recruiter's hat when I was in consulting or in the industry. Always what I look for is what kind of skill you bring to the table, right? So if you're in the field of supply chain for job interviews, that's what you're looking for, then always think about what they want. You've heard Vince talk about, problem solving skills, right? Can you solve a problem for me? I don't care what certification you have. Now, what I care about is if I hire you, can I put you in front of the client if I'm in consulting? Or if I'm in the industry, I'm looking for somebody who can solve my problem. Because I'm stressed out trying to solve myself, I need help. So always put that hat on and talk in that language. And that's where the story comes together from your resume, right? And in that story, certification can play a part of it, saying, hey, I have a body of knowledge. So, I can do these things. These are my skills. But don't going there and saying, I have a CPIM, hire me, doesn't mean anything. I'm not going to be interested. I'm looking for how does that CPIM combine with what you already know, and what is that skill set you're bringing in? Are you going to be a process person who can be value added when I go in front of an ERP implementation client? right? If I'm consulting. Or can you solve problems quick, right? I had an intern who was in the APICS board as well, who went and solved a problem for a client, and he was impressed. He actually reduced the waste out of his processes and did all that by asking questions. He was communicating with everybody. End of the day, the VP just fell off the chair. He called me and said, like, where did you get this guy from? This is a real story. And so that's what they're looking for. They want problem-solving people who can really do it. So let this certification be one of those planks, as I said before, which can support that. Because just saying, hey, I work for this company, I know a little bit of that, doesn't mean much. If you say, hey, I've done the CPIM, I understand the entire body of knowledge, or CSCP, and then then it brings cohesiveness to it, and it becomes a better story for recruiters.
Absolutely. And I think that also kind of plays right into the next question on, can certificates from Coursera be used to show that you have a knowledge in that field? And I think just like you were explaining, anything that you can bring, to the table and be able to, elevate and enhance your understanding of supply chain is only going to benefit you as you enter into the industry. Next one we'll go through is hoping to learn more about the cycle of APICS certifications. So I'm going to assume this means how frequently are they available?
This is the expert on that.
Yeah, so availability is at the chapter level. We try to teach CSCP 2 to 3 times a year, public classes, and then CPIM 2 times a year. So you have 2, for each you have a couple opportunities. CLTD 2 times a year as well to take the course. And, that's, if that answers the cycles of when they're going to be available.
Absolutely. Thank you. And also, do we really need additional certifications after getting a master's degree, like, a master's in supply chain or MBA or SCM?
Yeah, that's a good question. And maybe I would like to take this one. So I was hiring quite a few individuals. I had the opportunity to hire a few individuals, and those that have the APICS certifications that are, in the position to hire, they always have a lot of respect for others that have APICS. So I'm not to say that it's going to definitely help and it's going to strengthen your resume. MBA is significant. There's a lot, MBAs are getting a lot more well known. A lot more people are getting MBAs than ever before. So you got to think about, how do I continue to make myself very, unique as a professional, and certifications might be one way to do that. Yeah,
absolutely. I'd like to also add, I think it's a good thing to look at in terms of, when you see somebody who's a master's and somebody with a master's and an APICS certification, it definitely goes a long way in showing how vested you are in the industry and how, motivated you are and, how you carry yourself, I think.
Yeah, I would like to add one more aspect to this, because a lot of consulting is around technology, and then there are a lot of youngsters being able to fit well with that technological part of it, right? But then again, having the domain knowledge of supply chain makes your technology knowledge more relevant, and when you speak, people are able to understand what you're saying, or you are able to understand what they are asking for, and then you can put your technology to use in a much more effective way when you have the supply chain background, and then when you have the terminologies or the concepts or the ideas within the supply chain. Coming from Oracle, I can say for sure, and I'm sure SAP has something very similar to this. All of their products in the manufacturing field, they have been like inventory or applications for purchasing or sales orders or inventory or work in process. All of them have leveraged the body of knowledge of APICS particularly. And then when I was in Oracle, we were encouraged, we were allowed to take time off for this certification. We were paid part of the fees for the certification, because it's really valuable within Oracle to, or any ERP for that matter, to have APICS and APICS knowledge, and the only way you can let somebody know that you know the stuff is to get a certification. So that's how I look at it.
Totally. I mean, same thing with SAP too. I mean, the digital, part, like you're just a technology or depending on where you're at, right? The business knowledge is what you need, so that you can actually. Most companies look at that. How much of so technically you might know how to do that in Oracle or SAP, but the point is, do you understand the process and what brings that together? And that's what these certifications provide information and our process from an end-to-end perspective.
Perfect. Thank you. And our final question that we have is, being a freshman, which areas would be a good start when entering into the supply chain domain?
So if I can start, that's a good question. Supply chain can be intimidating. I would think about going back to that one side about plan, source, make, deliver, return, just kind of understand high level what each of those functions really are. And you can dive really deep in each of them, but understanding how they fit into the, the business impact. There's a lot of content that's available, and then that can help you tailor on which one is the best. So don't be intimidated if you're a freshman. Just thinking about the fact of you're getting ahead of the curve, because I didn't start taking certifications until maybe 5 years out of college. So you're going to be ahead of the curve with everyone else.
Thank you, Vince. Now I'd like to open up the floor to our panelists to address a few questions in terms of how you got into supply chain and your experiences with getting your certifications and how it impacted your career, and any advice or insights that you would give us as we are going in that direction. We'll go ahead and start with Jay.
Sure, thank you. So when I started working, I was working in the manufacturing field for some time back in India, and then later on when I moved to the US, I was working in large corporations that had large supply chains. So GE and then Motorola, both of them had their own chapters within the company to have their own study groups and all of that. So that's how important they felt supply chain was, getting the product where they need to be at, when they need to be at the right cost. So that was it can make or break a company, and we have seen that happen over and over again. So that's the reason why I got into supply chain. It was very relevant, and in the industry that I started out working, and getting the certification was just a natural next step to do when you acquire the knowledge that can make a difference in everyday working. So I was working with Oracle products and working with the GE and later on with Motorola. Getting APICS certification was the most appropriate thing to do. How it impacted was in my career throughout. I could relate to the problems that people were dealing with, and my communications were really apt for the situation because I understood the concepts, or understood the software process, or even when I could make enhancement requests within Oracle, I could make a lot more impactful enhancement requests, because I could literally let them know that what's the difference it's going to make if you can have this enhancement in the next release, things like that. So I would certainly encourage anyone to be in touch with this whole body of knowledge that has been brought together by so many professionals, and then it constantly evolves. So being in touch with APICS and APICS body of knowledge is very important when you are working in the industry, any manufacturing, any distribution, supply chain type of industry. Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you, Jay. I appreciate that. We'll go ahead and move on to Professor Ramesh.
Okay. So first of all, thanks for coming. About 29 people attending the session, for Friday evening is outstanding. I mean, shows your excitement for the profession and for all the good reasons, because supply chain, as you heard from Vince and Jay, is such a growing profession. Very exciting. That answers the first question. I mean, that's the reason why I got into supply chain. So dynamic. When I was a young engineer, I used to be a design engineer, and I couldn't do that job for more than like 3 years. And it was an interesting job. There was simulation involved. I was doing some interesting use of software, but sitting in a cube and trying to do some stuff, and that was not my personality. I wanted to go around, meet people, communicate. I wanted to figure out how things work. So I figured out that the first job I got into was going to be plant operations for a prototype center we developed for a major automotive, General Motors, and that's where it was an eye opener for me. I mean, all the things you can do. You're running your own business. You're becoming more and more attached to all the nuts and bolts of manufacturing. You know where the rubber hits the road. That's what supply chain is all about. So a lot of exciting. So that's the action is what drove me into supply chain, and still I have that passion, even though I'm not running in the plan and trying to drive people to get things done, or I'm not trying to plan and forecast in the company, or going into a client's place and trying to be a consultant. So all of these are challenging careers, which I've been involved in the past, like our panelists. So very exciting career ahead of you, and a lot of changes coming through. I want to touch on a few things. You're going to hear from us a lot of perspectives from what we have gone through. I'm rewinding myself 27 years ago. All of our panelists are talking, and some of them are bringing in stuff from, we're all working. I mean, even I used to work 2 years ago. So there's a lot of industry perspectives, but when we did certifications, and especially myself, and what has happened in the marketplace is an important thing to consider in terms of trends. So especially today, right? So I've been listening to a lot of industry leaders who are going to be potentially recruiters for you guys. And the last 3 months, that is the thing I've done. And I see some common things that comes out of all these industry leaders, what they're talking about. So they're all saying many things they say. I mean, they're talking about, how supply chain is going to change in terms of globalization. You've heard a lot about all this stuff, the tariffs, there's local sourcing people are discussing. But some of the common things are digital technologies. I was listening to the president of an aerospace company a few weeks ago. He said, I'm using digital technologies like, 3D printing and stuff like that. And then he said, I want to invest more in digital technologies. I was listening to another guy this morning. He's the vice president of a major company in India this morning. And he was talking about the same thing. You have to invest in technology. So whether it's in Asia or US, or you see that same thing. And skill-based recruiting, that's what they're talking about. We want to hire the people who has the skills in these areas. So let me put on my consultant's hat and tell you a few things. Okay, Jay and Vince will support that. And if you're a consulting background, you know that there are 3 things we look at: people, process, and technology, right? Those are the 3 things we look at, wherever we go, which our clients we talk to. So how is that thinking shifting as we go through the pandemic, right? So the pandemic has created some changes. The pre-pandemic was like, you got to look at people, the organizational structure, the process is very important. That's where all these certifications, and we've heard from the panelists about how the process and the technology advantage, right? Having technology certifications, process, certifications help you, whether it's Lean Six Sigma or APICS or whatever. Those are important things. Technology is the same thing, right? Understanding of the technology. So those are 3 big pillars in my mind, whether you're doing consulting or any industry jobs even. The only differentiator there is, there are some of you who are actually thinking about startups. So if you're going into the startup mentality, I would say you don't need any of these certifications, so frankly, to begin with. You might need that as you scale up. But you know from industry leaders like Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, many of them didn't even finish their education. This is a separate breed. I have one of my classmates who just, the richest guy among us, is doing really well in California. He sold 3 companies already and started 3 of them. And he he doesn't have any high-level degrees, but he's very passionate. He's driven by things like when you take supply chain, he can talk about supply chain for 2 hours. He doesn't have any APICS certifications. He doesn't have an MBA in supply chain management, but he understands the nuts and bolts of how things work. And once you give him some of that, you go after it deeper. So that's a different breed of people. And just want to tell you, UTD has a lot of opportunities there as well. If you're getting the Blackstone Launchpad, there are courses being offered. So some of you might be thinking that path. It's an excellent path. There's a lot of opportunities, especially with the digital technologies. So let me get into my experience about, that's the thing which you want to consider. Think about yourself, what is going to be valuable for you before you do the certification, as we discussed earlier, and then decide which path to take and strengthen that with the experience you can bring in. It can be a project, class project. It can be an internship, would be even better if you can get an internship and then connect the dots. Always be ready to tell a story. I just want to repeat that, which is so very important in any of those recruitment sessions. My experience has been always to pursue certifications, and you don't have to follow me, but what I found was, as I went through my jobs, from a design engineer to manufacturing, I looked at, there's a need for solving MRP problems. That's where I got into the APICS certification when I was working in Indiana. And, I didn't understand the nuts and bolts of MRP, and the only way I could do that was the CPIM certification. So I didn't know that CPIM existed at that point. So I went to the chapter meetings and figured that out, and then pretty soon I got certified. And it just helped me tremendously to do the job. The PMP, which is coming from an outside organization, when I did that, the biggest thing I was looking for was a promotion into management. And many of my colleagues who were doing the same thing had some kind of project management experience, but they couldn't put that together in a framework format. So did I gain anything out of it? Outstandingly. When I applied for the job with my PMP certification, instead of giving me a project management job, they gave me that as a head of a PMO. So I became the head of PMO, sitting with all those guys who were 25 years experience, the same board. And I was running the aftermarket PMO for Delphi aftermarket, which was outstanding. I couldn't have gotten that experience if I didn't have the certification in my hand, which kind of supported all my experiences I had in managing projects. And the black belt, same thing. So I was trying to do, as Vince said, I was doing some problem solving, and I said, like, what else can I do to make my problem solving skills better? And Six Sigma is a way to do that. Statistical background, Lean is a part of that, right? And so when you combine them together, Lean Six Sigma stuff is valuable. Again, I can actually put all these things into a story if I want to tell a recruiter how these things have helped me. That's the kind of thing, I think that's your power in front of a recruiter, right? So I'd always support that. Storytelling is a big part of it. We have an immersion program, consulting immersion program for MBA students. Some of you might be coming into that. And we have Accenture, Periveta Solutions, and there are a bunch of companies that come together, ENY, and we talk about how to mentor students to go into consulting. And all of us, pay a lot of attention to these skill development, and storytelling is a big part of that. So with that, I'm going to stop here, and I know that I can keep talking on and on about this, and open up for any other questions.
Thank you, Ramesh. I appreciate it. Lots of good insights there. Next, we'll go ahead and move on for our last panelist, Vince Mozik.
Sure, thanks. I know we're a little late on time. I'll be really quick and to the point. So why did I choose supply chain? I think I knew I wanted to work into business at some magnitude, but if you really understand how companies make money and how they bring value to customers, there's no way around the importance of their supply chain. It always amazes me today that supply chain doesn't have as much attention as it should have, right? So we think about accounting, finance, other functions that have, been around. So it's pretty, I wanted to know really how the engine worked at companies, and that's where in supply chain, you're in the middle of all the chaos to fix things, right? What was the experience of getting the certifications? It wasn't easy, right? I studied a lot, and it was really intense for myself. These are globally recognized certifications, and they can be intimidating. And just know that once you have it, you don't need to sell yourself about knowing supply chain. You already have that level of understanding when you're sitting in front of recruiters or hiring managers, right? So it's a lot of work. It's a lot of reward. When I started getting certifications, I got a lot more interest from other companies. In my 20s, every couple of years, I went to a different job. Makes my resume look a little jumpy, but I was able to make more money. And I think a lot of it was due to having certifications, and because companies need help solving problems. It's impacted my career from that perspective. The one thing that's interesting is I think I got a lot more interested in supply chain the more in depth I got. And I know that can seem a little, but it's like anything. When you learn something in detail, you're going to become continuing focused in that, and you're going to want to learn more. Any advice? Just know that some of the physical and digital world of supply chain are getting a lot more integrated. Companies are looking to automate things. The future supply chain leaders are all about really embracing technology, and the whole collaborative. There's different skills that are needed. Companies really need help, and these certifications could really help you bring value to companies. So, you could be a great leader without having certifications, no question about it. Some of my best bosses didn't have college degrees early in my career, right? We all learn differently, and this is one way in one area that will give you that level of focus. One last thing is, I put in the chat box, I put where to register for the classes, and pricing and details are on there. I don't want to share pricing for non-UTD students because we can't think about this as a commodity. Thinking about it is investing in yourself. That's the best thing you can do. So, their pricing is available on our APICS North Texas website. Thank you.
Thank you, Vince. I appreciate it. Lots of great info there. So thank you again, Vince, Ramesh, Jay. Thank you for joining us today and sharing your insights and your experiences with us and helping us as we move forward on our journey in supply chain industry. Lastly, wanted to come through and just put out APICS UTD student chapter is going to be is currently taking applications for the fall semester. So if you're looking to get more involved within the university, take an opportunity to grow your network outside the classroom and to be a part of a growing organization focused in supply chain excellence, you can scan this QR code or utilize a link provided below, and our team will reach out to you at the start of the fall semester. Lastly, also be sure to follow us on social media for some of the latest trends and updates for upcoming events and opportunities that are being facilitated through our chapter, as well as our parent chapter. Our email is also provided there. If you have any questions or any concerns or need anything, please don't hesitate to reach out and our team will get back to you as soon as possible. Thank you again. And that concludes our event today. And we're looking forward to seeing everybody at our next event. And one more time, thank you to all you panelists for taking the time out of your day, as well as all the participants for showing up and investing your Friday afternoon into your your career. So I really appreciate it. And that'll conclude our meeting for today.
Thank you, Richard.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.